So this is like the antidote, right? I feel like what he's serving up here is the antidote to the flu that is the MAGA party, right? People are sick. Republicans are literally they have this fever.
In 1982, during a cesarean operation, the anesthetist turned the wrong knob and killed the mother and child. The hospital called this a therapeutic misadventure. 3 weeks ago in Los Angeles, according to the Los Angeles Times, in a series of incidents that the pathologist called incredible stupidity and incompetence, the surgeons killed the patient. It included slitting the patient's throat during surgery. This was called a therapeutic misadventure.
How about economically non-affluent?
That's what the president of the City University of New York called the poor students attending the City University. They came from economically non-affluent families.
All right, guys. So welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be diving into a concept of one of the tools that politicians use to kind of hide the truth from you. But this is one of their sharpest tools in the old drawer, as it were. This is something that both sides use. Republicans and Democrats alike, even independents over there with Bernie Sanders, they've used it. Business folks, especially, use this. I want to say that even Steve Jobs has been known to use it very effectively to get their point across when they're trying to sell you something, right? What are politicians other than salesmen, right? They find a way to reframe reality and to make you understand the narrative that they need you and want you to understand, so that way you can put your resources toward what they need. When it's politicians, it's votes. When it's businessmen, it's your dollars. So this concept comes from a George Orwell fiction called 1984, where people basically lost their freedoms, and the government was known to use this doublespeak ability to say one thing but mean another. And the people who weren't hip to this idea of doublespeak lost their freedoms. They lost everything. There's a gentleman named William Lutz who wrote a book in 1989 that explains what doublespeak is, and we're going to do a reaction to that video right now.
William Lutz, what is doublespeak?
Doublespeak is language designed to evade responsibility, make the unpleasant appear pleasant, the unattractive appear attractive. Basically, it's language that pretends to communicate but really doesn't. It is language designed to mislead while pretending not to.
Is it done consciously?
Oh, yes, very consciously. Doublespeak is not a slip of the tongue or a mistaken use of language. It's exactly the opposite. It is language used by people who are very intelligent and very sophisticated in the use of language and know that you can do an awful lot with language.
Who's the worst offender?
In sheer bulk,
Yes.
sheer numbers of examples, the government. If we count government from the local level all the way up to the federal level, I had to stop writing the chapter on government doublespeak. It was going to take over the whole book. But interestingly enough, and this was a revelation in doing the book, about a half a step behind comes business.
You see where that comes in, where with former President Trump being a businessman, there's a good chance that he learned of doublespeak through someone who was coaching him through business. There are ways to attract funding and kind of not tell the truth to potential investors. And then there's ways to do it in advertising, like how I mentioned Steve Jobs would do it with advertising for his keynotes, where the hyper geeks would dissect what Steve would be saying on stage, but the average consumer wouldn't understand that, by this being 20 times faster than the last iPad or what have you, the hyper geeks go, wait a minute, 20 times, this doesn't equate to actually 20 times. This is the kind of stuff we're talking about. When it comes to politicians, when they talk about a woman's right to choose, they never say what's actually in their mind. They never say, oh, we're going to take the women's rights to their bodies. No, they use doublespeak. They say it in a way where now you feel obligated to give your vote to their agenda. So instead of saying we're going to take women's rights to their bodies, they're going to say we're going to protect the lives of children. See how that sounds? It sounds much better to say we're going to protect the lives of children than saying we're going to take away women's rights to their bodies. If they say we don't want a woman to be able to make a decision on her own pregnancy. They would never say that. That would go nowhere. They use doublespeak and they'll say, we're going to protect unborn babies. That's doublespeak.
How long has the government been using doublespeak?
I think of government as the third oldest profession, and probably from the moment government was instituted, doublespeak came with it. I cite examples from the 5th century BC in Greece, Julius Caesar, when he
Wow.
pacified Gaul. Of course, Nazi Germany thrived on doublespeak. So,
Oh my gosh. Okay. So there's been so many parallels to Trump and Nazi Germany. It seems as if someone in his group studied Nazi Germany and they understand doublespeak. Why do I know so much about this? Well, I'm a film major, and while I was in film, I was appalled and shocked and chilled that one of the first things I had to learn in my editing classes was propaganda, and they made us watch footage of the Reich, Hitler's government, and how they would make these political videos that would couch the Reich as the heroes. So like this is nothing new to me. I'm just sharing what I've learned with you guys.
it's been around for quite a while.
When did you first get interested in this?
In 1978, I became head of the Committee on Public Doublespeak, and in 1980, I started editing the quarterly review of Doublespeak, and that's when I became very interested in it, simply because as editing, I have all the examples of doublespeak sent to me, and so I wade through them all.
What got you interested in it?
My interest in rhetoric, I did, in my PhD, I did work in rhetoric, and I was interested in rhetoric. And in 1977, I published a textbook called The Age of Communication, which was a little different at the time. I tried to examine the rhetoric of television, radio, the mass media, advertising, taking Aristotle's classical rhetoric and apply it to modern media. I had a lot of fun doing that, and as a result of that textbook, I was asked to join the committee, and I saw rhetoric and language coming all together in doublespeak in an interesting way.
Universities also have a problem with doublespeak, don't they?
Oh, yes. Oh, I continually bite the hand that feeds when I cite Rutgers, and at least every issue I have an example from Rutgers University. One of my favorite, we don't have a physical education department at Rutgers. We have a department of human kinetics.
Why?
Well, I also point out in my book that people in physical education have come up with all of these different terms because they've gone professional. They now have their own journals, so they have their own academic jargon. And as the dean at Minnesota, who wanted to change the name of his physical education school, said, we're not taken seriously unless we have a name like this. We can't get the grants. We can't publish the articles.
How long have you been at Rutgers?
Since 1971.
What do you teach?
I teach a variety of courses in the English department, but I teach rhetoric, linguistics, and some Victorian literature. And I also teach a survey course that's required of all students. We start with the Iliad and the Odyssey and work our way up.
You know, I do get the feeling that people nowadays have very little idea of what rhetoric is. I feel like people are too busy learning from their cell phones. I feel like we're in this crazy TikTok learning kind of popcorn phase where people want to pull out their phones, they want to look at a 30-second, possibly 1-minute video to learn a topic and then jump out. Unfortunately, you can't do that with things like doublespeak. You can't do that with things like rhetoric because there's components. Just like with grade school, when they teach you how to put together a paper, there's going to be an intro, there's going to be a body, and that body is comprised of parts. There's going to be a middle and there's going to be an ending. You can't just absorb these concepts with just 30 seconds. You can't just absorb these concepts with a 1-minute video. There's going to be a little bit of time to kind of consume all this. And then on top of all that, this guy is talking about a university, right? We're already talking, we just went through the protest because of the Palestinian treatment and things where these people who are spending thousands and thousands of dollars per year are attending these universities, and they're upset with the doublespeak of the school because the school is being funded through Israeli money. So this stuff does affect U.S. politics. It does affect, if you're a university student, it does affect you. It would behoove you to look this stuff up and to understand how doublespeak is used. And if you're shrewd enough, you can use doublespeak for your own agenda I would hope it would be a positive agenda. As you can see, that people are using this for quite the nefarious means. This is a powerful thing. There are people who say that the pen is mightier than the sword. Some might say that the tongue is the mightiest tool of them all.
Is there any example in history, I mean, ancient history and literature of doublespeak?
Yes, one I cite just as a passing example is Thucydides in the 5th century BC in the Peloponnesian War. During the war, there was a very vicious civil war in Athens at that time. And Thucydides points out that at that time, the very language itself became corrupted to their own ends. Acts of cowardice became acts of great bravery. Traitorous deeds towards friends became patriotic acts.
What he's talking about, guys, to me here is that concept of history is written by the victors, right? If a people are conquered, they don't have a voice anymore, right? Their voices are suppressed, and the history books are printed, pressed, and shipped by the people who won the particular war. So that is something to keep in mind, that this is that kind of tool here.
And he cites the whole list. And it's interesting that Thucydides cites this corruption of language as the ultimate in horror that occurred during that civil war.
Do you ever personally find yourself using doublespeak?
Oh, yeah. When I was head of the department, I had to engage in doublespeak. You have to write recommendations. You have to write personnel evaluation forms. I had to pitch for more money. And so you use the doublespeak of bureaucracy as anyone else. If I were a bureaucrat who would function within the bureaucracy using straight language, I wouldn't be taken seriously. It's a sort of ritualistic use of language.
You just got to do it.
Are you in this
It's a
whole
tool.
world of doublespeak because you want to get rid of it?
Oh, yes. I don't think you'll ever get rid of it. I don't think we can. It is inherent in the function of language to use language as a weapon or as a tool to manipulate other people. However, I think there are two things we can do. First of all, we can all become much more aware of this language. We should be aware of it so that we can at least be defensive and defend ourselves so that we're not misled through it. But secondly, there are times when we simply cannot tolerate this language. When we talk about important public issues of national policy, we should not use doublespeak as a nation. We should not use it ourselves. We should not allow the politicians who are speaking to us to use it.
I've talked about the MAGA Republicans and how they've literally come in and they've completely dismantled the Republican Party. They've torn it down and built it back up on a system that basically doublespeak is their largest, most sharpest tool. I don't know if this man is alive today. I would love to get his thoughts on what the MAGA Republicans have done. Again, he did say that even everyone uses this. He's used it himself. I'm telling you that much loved CEOs of days old use it. Tim Cook today still uses doublespeak. But when he's saying it's too dangerous in politics, he's talking about what happened even in the past, where he described the horrors of it being used during a civil war in the Peloponnesian area. Like, this is a tool that leads to corruption beyond imagination. And this is what the GOP has done. This is why you have this new crazy Republican Party. There's Republicans out there who are afraid to even call themselves Republicans now.
Language that way can be terribly corrupting in a society and can mislead all of us. And in a democracy that depends upon the active participation of its citizens, it can lead to cynicism and resentment and a withdrawal from the political process.
There it is.
Does that have anything to do with the reason why only 50% of the American people voted in 1988?
I have a hypothesis that I would love to test, and I hope sometime to be able to do that. I would love to be able to track the pervasiveness of doublespeak as it grew, along with the decline in voting. Because the reaction I get to doublespeak from a lot of readers of the Quarterly Review as they write to me is, well, of course I know this language. I see it all over the place. I see it all the time. But, you know, what else can you expect from politicians? They all lie. They all use doublespeak. It is that cynicism which leads to there's nothing I can do about it, so people withdraw and pull back.
Who was George Orwell?
George Orwell was a British essayist, reviewer, critic, novelist who published the now classic novel 1984. But in 1947, he published Politics in the English Language, an essay which, by the way, is the most reprinted essay in the English language. It's just endlessly reprinted,
Wow.
in which he warned about the corruption of thought through language. The examples he used all came from Stalinist Russia and Nazi Germany.
My
He
goodness.
had, during the Second World War, served in the British Ministry of Propaganda or Information, and was introduced to the inside of the propaganda process. And he wrote
Oh my gosh, this stuff is literally sending chills and like emotion down my spine when I hear this, because I was just telling you guys that like that is what, oh my goodness, this is what the MAGA Republicans have done. They have literally studied Nazi Germany. They've studied Stalin, guys. Like, this is what you're getting involved in. If you are a MAGA Republican, you are being fooled. They have pulled the wool over your head, guys. And I would bet that 99% of these guys out there in those daggone conventions wearing those red hats and things haven't read a single syllable, barely forget a word. They haven't read a single syllable of the things that led to Nazi Germany. They haven't read anything about Stalin. They haven't read 1984, guys. If you want to be a part of the informed, if you want to not have your soul and your spirit misled, you have to read this guy's book. You have to consume this video, learn what they're doing, learn the tools, so that way when you hear doublespeak, you can erase that agenda from your mind. Don't be misled. Don't be a fool. Listen to people like this. This is so vital to the survival of your family and your life in this country going forward, guys.
1984 as a novel of the future in which, given the growth of the power of communications and the sophisticated use of language, totalitarian governments would base their power upon the control of minds through language. And he really believed that.
When did he die?
He died in 1948 of lung disease.
You think he would have, if he'd lived, he'd have been surprised about two things. One, the popularity of 1984 as a novel, and two, what actually happened in those totalitarian governments in 1989.
By both of those. First of all, there's a whole discussion over why this novel became so popular. It was originally titled, by the way, The Last Man in Europe, and it got the title 1984 by flipping the last two digits of 48. Oh, by the way, he died in 49 because he died right after the novel came out. Novel did only modestly well. After he died, however, it got tremendously popular. He also published Animal Farm, that classic, which was soundly denounced by the Communist Party and also got a lot of press. But it wasn't until after his death that the novel became as popular as it was.
That's crazy.
In 1984, that novel sold 50,000 copies a week in the United States.
In 1984.
In 1984.
They're hungry
in the year
for it, guys. You should read it.
1984.
Did the fact the novel existed or exists have any impact on making sure that it really didn't happen?
Well, during 1984, there were, of course, a flurry of conferences and discussions about, has the world of 1984 come to pass? And of course, there were people who said, no, we haven't. And on the other hand, people said, oh, yes, it has. That's a judgment call. I think that in some ways it's far worse than the world that Orwell envisioned. On the other hand, it's not as bad as he envisioned. The events
That was, now remember, this interview is of 1989. Guys, we're way past where they thought that this thing was going, like way past. Like, just look at people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. Look how they speak. Look at how the MAGA Republicans speak.
Q is a patriot. We know that for sure, but we do not know who Q is. People believe that Q is someone very close to President Trump. According to him, many in our government are actively worshiping Satan, or they call Moloch. I mean, is it going to be true that the child pedophilia in the elites in the Washington, D.C., is that what we're really going to see come out? Is it going to be satanic worship?
Guys, look at the tactics they're using. These people are literally using communistic tactics on you. If you guys have grandfathers or remember some of the things your grandfather said who came out of World War II, they were talking about commie bastards all the time. They found a way to flip that stuff around. So like now, technically, you've got communists talking to you right now. They're using doublespeak to hide it, but literally, oh my goodness, guys.
Eastern Europe show us that it is becoming almost impossible to control the information environment as tightly as Orwell envisioned it. The only country I can think of that can do that now is North Korea. They're the only one that is they're hermetically sealed from the rest of the world. Romania is trying to be hermetically sealed, and I don't know how successful they will be. But as the Chinese government found out, the existence of telephones and fax machines and personal computers simply makes it impossible to control language and therefore ideas in the way that Orwell saw it in 1984. But I think that what governments have done, if they've just gone a step beyond that, they will let...
Well, now they have firewalls. People talk about the Great Firewall of China and so on. North Korea has benefited greatly from Chinese engineering with their connections they have with China. And the firewalls can prevent many people in that country from getting anything in and out. But that's for another video. But firewalls didn't exist back in 1989. That's why he doesn't have any concept of it.
The information flow, they will just try and control the way that the content of that flow of information.
George Orwell, from Politics and English Language, 1946. Most people who bother with the matter at all would admit that the English language is in a bad way. Orwell's throughout this entire book. Why did you pick him?
Well, Orwell in his two works, his essay, Politics in the English Language, and then really giving full-blown thought to that essay in his novel 1984, addressed the importance of language in society and the control and manipulation of language to control and direct society. I think the most important point in 1984 is that power grows not out of the barrel of a gun. Power grows not out of the thought police and rule by terror. It grows out of the power of language in that novel. The revolutionary act committed by Winston Smith right at the beginning of that novel is to keep a diary. In keeping a diary, any person who keeps a diary uses language to communicate with the self. You're talking to yourself and you're thinking through words about the world around you and about how you feel. That's why a diary is such a revolutionary act in 1984, because you are reasserting personal control over language. Then at the end of the novel, to parallel that scene, when Winston Smith has been found out and O'Brien, his torturer and guide, says to him, "What is reality? Reality is not external. Reality exists not in the mind of the individual, which soon perishes, but in the mind of the party, which is collective and immortal. What the party says is reality is real." And how else can the party do that? Except by language. Party has taken control of language and has taken it away from the individual. And that's the power, because those in power who control language control the way we see the world.
All right, guys, there you have it. Like he's literally talking about what I mean, this is 1989, but here we are in 2024, and you guys have, if you're a Republican, you've lost your party. The language that used to be what John McCain would say, that used to be what Mitt Romney would say, hell, but used to be what Bush Sr. and Bush Jr. would say. They lost that. They no longer have control of their party. The party is Trump, and the Trump is the party. The MAGA Republicans, they own that party. They've taken that language away. If you are a Republican, it's almost like they've hijacked your bus, and you're kind of pushed to the back while these new people get in front and sit with the bus driver, who is Trump and MAGA Republicans. They're driving the bus, and you guys are made to kind of like feel uncomfortable. Like, should I be here? This feels weird. What did he say? Oh my gosh, I can't believe he's talking like that. But the rest of the bus seems to enjoy this. Maybe I should compromise my morals and stay on the bus. I applaud you guys. I applaud you guys who've opened up that exit, that emergency exit, in the back of a school bus and jumped the hell out. I really feel like you guys have honor. You don't want to sacrifice it. I feel bad for you people who just said, you know what, I'm still a Republican. I'm going to stay on this bus no matter what. Like, when the bus starts going and passing exits, that's essentially what has happened. The Republican Party is, they're breaking the speed limit. They're disobeying speed signs. They're using doublespeak like this. They're not playing well on the road with other politicians, which would be the other side, the liberal side of things. I think someone just mentioned that the new revolution will be bloodless if the liberals allow it.
Others on the right are applauding the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity including the president of the Heritage Foundation, who says that it's vital to getting the country back, as he gives an ominous warning to the left. Listen.
In spite of all this nonsense from the left, we are going to win. We're in the process of taking this country back. We are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
Like, they're speaking like that now, guys. They've even taken the kid gloves off. Things are very dangerous, guys. You have to understand this kind of information. It's so important for you to understand in today's America, while we still have control over how we're able to speak publicly. Like, who knows what kind of freedoms they're going to rip away once they've cemented their power in the presidency again.
Let's talk about political parties just for a second. Let me name three for you and tell me which one is the worst abuser of doublespeak. The Communist Party, the Democratic Party, or the Republican Party in history?
I would say I'd give them all three. They're right in there by the nature of politics. I would say that the Communist Party would be leading the other two simply because under the time of Stalin and others, language was used to justify, mass murder of millions of people, exactly the same as the Nazis did. Use a language to justify murder. But as we see, any politician in power starts using doublespeak. The Democrats did. Right? I love Jimmy Carter's comment on the failed raid to free the hostages in Iran. He called it an incomplete success. He did that without even thinking about it. He was just automatically using that kind of language. But we had used language in Vietnam to justify our actions in Vietnam. The Republican Party, once attaining power, has used doublespeak to justify and explain and silence their critics. But I don't see that as being different from any other politician. What Orwell says in Politics in the English Language is, it is clear that the corruption of language ultimately has political and economic causes.
Now, guys, what I will say here is that when he mentions the Communist Party, he's talking about Communist Party overseas. He's not mentioning that there's a legitimate Communist Party in America. However, that was 1989. I've just alluded to the fact that the Republican Party has been broken down and built back up with communist DNA. So what you have is, instead of them using doublespeak to justify murders, they're using doublespeak to justify the murdering of our freedoms and the laws in America, right? They use doublespeak to destroy women's right to choose. That's a murder, guys. It's a legitimate murder, but it's a murder of something that protects you, that gives you the right to choose, that gives your daughter, your sister, it gave your mother the right to choose what happens to her body, right? And the thing is, they're going to use doublespeak. Some of you guys have been inundated with doublespeak. You may be turning your brain off when I say women rights to choose. Maybe that's twisting your stomach and you go, the woman rights to choose to do what? Kill people? Kill unborn children? Remember, I told you that is the type of doublespeak that's meant to twist your brain. In reality, we're talking about a woman's right to remove something that's growing inside of her that may have been put there by rape. That may have been put there by incest. I'm not using doublespeak here. There are legitimate rape and incest situations where the fall of Roe v. Wade now says that they can't remove that fetus from their body now. They just have to allow the rape, in my opinion, they allow the rape to continue. This is important, guys. This is why we're here today. This is how the Republican Party has amassed so much strength and using the DNA of communists' ability to just justify horrible acts and make it seem like it's normal and make it seem like they're the heroes.
Who are your favorite people in the world that have used language over the years that you think use less doublespeak than a lot of the others that are in this book?
I'm not sure about less doublespeak. I think more of people who were aware of the power of language and how to use it and use it effectively.
Or maybe I should ask you, who are the straight shooters? Who are the people that you say really give it to us straight?
And hit you between the eyes? Boy, that's a tough question, because the closest I could come would be right now, Colin Powell, for his explanation of the war, my term, in Panama. There have been a few politicians who have been quite blunt. Senator Moynihan can when he chooses to be. He can also use doublespeak, but he can be pretty blunt when he wants to be and pretty forceful. There are a few people in Congress and the House of Representatives who, when they choose, can be quite blunt. What I find interesting about that use of language, those are people who are very conscious of when it is the ritualistic doublespeak that they're going to use, and when they think they can achieve more by using blunt language. So they can turn it on and turn it off. John Kennedy understood the power of rhetoric. This isn't to say he didn't use doublespeak, which he did, but he understood that language had the power to move us and to inspire us and to set a public agenda and define ourselves as a nation.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't seen such language in quite a while. Harry Truman was probably the bluntest speaker we ever had as a president.
Until now.
For not caring about the consequences, he would just say. And I think we have looked back on him now and said, boy, you know, he really was pretty straightforward. I have a rule about presidents and presidential speeches. I do not watch them when they are given.
Oh, wow.
I read the text of the speech first.
Interesting.
Then I watch the speech so that I am not influenced by all of the visual trappings that go with the speech.
I see.
And if you look at the words in the page, you'll get a quite different message quite often than the message you'll get from the visual image.
Guys, let me know down below if you're sticking with me, because this is a 15-minute video so far and probably more with my commentary. Look, we should probably break down some of these guys' speeches and do it by words, because if what he says is true, I think you guys who are kind of trapped in the whole carefully poised rhetoric and carefully employed doublespeak in the MAGA Republicans party's tool chest, we might be able to get a different sentiment if we were to read this stuff without, like he says, the visual trappings. Because remember, back when I was doing my film major studies, I was telling you how I was made to study the editing tactics of the Nazis and the Reich, and how they made themselves look like heroes. Like there's a reason and a way that they give political speeches and how they're done. I've always been very sensitive to cinema. Even as a small child, I was one of the few people who was able to spot the glass that separated the snakes from Harrison Ford in Raiders of the Last Ark. I've always had a sharp eye for that kind of thing. So when I was graduating from high school and we had the unfortunate situation of 9/11, I remember watching Junior Bush's warning to Saddam Hussein at the time, telling him to get out of his country. At that moment, that told me that if I were to go into the military, I would have to put fire and fury down on people that had nothing to do with what happened. And it's funny he should mention Colin Powell, because, you know, this was 1989 that he's speaking now, but Colin Powell would go on to deliver doublespeak to the American people. He was made to do so, a general made to do so, that he would go on before his death. He apologized for that. So it's like a lot of things can flip. The winds can blow in weird directions in politicians, when it comes to politicians. And it's just, to me, it's chilling and stunning to get this raw video to explain this, because I'm even learning things here, guys. Like this is a powerful thing.
That with Oliver North's testimony, which comes across quite different on the printed page. Harry Truman's comments now seem blunter than ever when read on the printed page. Richard Nixon doesn't seem quite as flat on the printed page as he was in life, because I think his persona overshadowed his words. And at times, his language isn't as duplicitous as some people thought it was in some instances, although he was capable, as we saw during Watergate, of using a lot of doublespeak. So there's always a mixture of language, because anyone who reaches any position of power must either instinctively or knowingly know how to use doublespeak and know how to use it at a certain time and when to turn it on and off, and to what degree. You can simply track that in anyone in the rise to power. I'm trying to think of the great Spencer Tracy movie. It's a classic film where he's running for president. He's the ordinary man who gets caught up in the presidential race, and he becomes a national hero. And one of the things they do in the movie is show that as he moves closer to getting the nomination, he starts using more and more of what we would call doublespeak. Until finally there comes a scene at the end of the movie when he gets so disgusted with what he has become that he quits the race. And will, even though he has by this point become a shoo-in for the nomination, if not the election, he just quits it. But the movie has traced the compromises that he makes through language in order to achieve it. And I think that the American public believes that in order to get that far, you have to sell off so much that there's not much left at the other end, and that is reflected in the language that you use.
This book is in the bookstores?
Yes, it is.
It's $17.95?
Yes.
How'd you do this book?
I did the book, somebody asked me, how long did it take you to write the book? I said it took me 10 years to research it and 6 months to write it. I sat down and tried to make sense out of all the doublespeak that I've been collecting, because there is a tendency to have a perception that it is scattered hither and yon. The function of the book is to gather it and focus it to show you that there is a pattern and a progression to this language. And I structured the book to have a lot of fun in the beginning and the humorous uses of doublespeak, but leading to the more important uses of doublespeak by government, the Pentagon, and the issues of nuclear war and peace, and how doublespeak corrupts that whole process.
What's the most often asked question?
The chapter on food and food doublespeak. Everyone goes after that one about, is it true that you can put sugar free on a product and still have sugar in it? Is probably the one question I've been asked most often, because people simply can't believe that happens.
How can it happen?
Because sugar-free simply means they haven't added table sugar or cane sugar to it. They can add mannose, fructose, any of the syrup sweeteners, and still call it sugar-free.
So you know when you eat something that's sugar-free, there's sugar in it.
Oh, yes, and by the way, I found out in a radio interview when they had people in the audience calling in, a man called in and said, do you mean that there's sugar in there? I said, well, yes, there's sugars in that food. He said, well, I'm a diabetic, and my wife makes sure she buys only the sugar-free.
Oh, my gosh.
I said, you can't eat those. You have to use only the dietetic, because that's governed by law. Sugar-free isn't.
There you go.
Here's a man who was threatening his health through this kind of false labeling. It was absolutely amazing. But the food chapter has really...
In food.
I guess we're all interested in food for some reason. I've been asked endless questions on that chapter.
What are the other books that you've done? You don't have to go through every one of them, but in general, what areas?
Well, at the same time that I published that, I published a collection of essays on doublespeak by the National Council of Teachers of English, in which I asked a group of scholars to each contribute an essay on an aspect of doublespeak. So I edited those and published that book. I edited the revised edition of the Webster's New World Thesaurus, published by Simon & Schuster. I'm probably one of the few people who has ever read the dictionary from cover to cover twice.
So we got a very intelligent guy here.
And I edited that thesaurus. And then
astuteness to be
a variety of textbooks on rhetoric and on writing, and a book on revolution and revolutionary theory.
What did you learn when you read that dictionary from cover to cover?
Boy, did I learn a lot about words. I learned a lot of archaic words, a lot of archaic definitions. But, you know, the dictionary is fascinating to read. You can pick it up and flip it open and start reading. A good dictionary. Too many of the desk dictionaries are so edited down that there's no life to the language or life to words. If you get a good desk dictionary that gets into the backgrounds of the words and the words in context, words are fascinating.
Guys, I have to stop it again here, because we're at so many people, so few people read, right? It's almost depressing when you realize the amount of people who use words through their mouths every day, but don't understand the background and the origin of the words they use, and the subtext of the meaning of these words. We've got people out there on social media saying some of the worst things ever on, Twitter, X, formerly Twitter. They don't even understand some of these words. I saw Megyn Kelly responding to a tweet that Stephen King had wrote about AR-15 style weapons being used to assault Trump, and how the Republicans, as well as Trump himself, wished to advocate to keep those weapons in the hands of people today. And the words she used, like, she called the man ugly, she called the man basically saying he should stay in his lane, is she just doesn't seem to understand the the reach of her words. You know, it's in the implications of what she's saying, because she wants to just protect the man who has inundated her life with doublespeak. You could say that the Fox News channel's whole MO is to use as much doublespeak as possible to sway the hearts and minds of Americans who are um, uneducated enough to just use it as their single source of news. I've done videos on this channel where I've been basically begging you guys, please, please, please use other news sources besides Fox. I'm not saying don't listen to Fox at all, because I think it's important to kind of understand the contrast between a C-SPAN, a CNN, and so on, and Fox. But please, please, please do not believe just what they say. I know that they have these ridiculous jingles where it's like Fox, fair and balanced, and stuff like that. Like, that is marketing. That in and of itself is doublespeak, to call themselves fair and balanced when they're trying to make money with commercials. So they're going to say these things that inflame your sense of righteousness, that inflame your sense of justice, and make you stick around as you get inundated with more and more drug commercials, more and more car commercials, more and more life insurance commercials. Remember, we live in a society that is based on consumerism. So they're doing their part to make sure you get emotionally charged, so that way you stick on that channel so you can watch those daggone commercials so they can fill their pockets. They don't care the moral toll is taken on them. They don't care about the intellectual magic smoke and mirror game they're playing with your hearts and minds.
And fun and language comes alive on the page. And in writing the thesaurus, you get into the shades of meaning, the nuances, and the power of words, and the images that they can create in your mind.
What are the best dictionaries?
Well, there's the unabridged is the dictionary you always want of reference.
What does that mean, unabridged?
Unabridged means absolutely everything is in there. They have edited out nothing. Every definition, every meaning of the word, every example, which is why the unabridged is about that thick. All the dictionaries that we deal with are abridged, which means that they take out a lot of the specialized words and try to boil it down to a core of words that are everyday usage, and then they'll cut back even the meanings of the words. Even in the thesaurus, a word like fix, a verb fix, can have up to 28 different meanings. But you normally don't list all 28. You'll maybe pick 14 or 12 of common usage. So
what's the difference between a dictionary and a thesaurus?
A dictionary gives you the meanings of the words, all the meanings, and a strict definition for each one. A thesaurus gives you synonyms for the word. So if you want to look up the adjective busy, you want synonyms for that word. Words that say the same thing, but not quite, shades of meaning. One of the phrases I gave was in conference.
I just had an experience a couple weeks ago where somebody saw one of these shows and criticized me for using a word incorrectly. And I think the word was parochial. I was referring to something that was, special for a small group, parochial. And she said, you're just not using it, or the word is provincial. So I trotted off to my dictionary and found out that I was right. And so was she.
Yes.
So who writes these things? And who writes the dictionary in the first place?
Lexicographers write it. The World Dictionary is produced in Cleveland. If you go to Cleveland, Ohio, you will find in a building downtown that there's a floor that Simon & Schuster has for their dictionary staff. And there's a group of people who sit around and they read. They read magazines, newspapers, and they look for words and new meanings of words. And these are pulled out and entered into the computer. And that's what you do.
And what company is Simon & Schuster? What's the name on that dictionary?
Webster's New World Dictionary.
Unabridged.
They're working on an unabridged. The unabridged, I'm not sure when the next date is coming out. They have a huge collection of new meanings and new words. And whenever they pick those out, they have to take the sentence in which it was used, what's called the citation, so that the meaning is perfectly clear in that sentence for that shade of meaning. One of the things that I did in my book, I learned from them. All of my examples of doublespeak are not only real, but I have the original context in which the phrase occurred, or I won't use it. So I have file drawers filled with clippings and memos and letters that have been sent to me in which the word is used in context so that I can see that the example of doublespeak is real, it's serious, and how it is used. And that's the only way that I'll accept an example.
I'll get off this dictionary in a second, but this is interesting. How many people are involved in producing the Webster's Unabridged Dictionary?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of people. This is a big undertaking. You'll have, I met the senior editorial staff that I met consisted of 8 people. These are the senior editors. And below them will be all kinds of other editors and citation checkers and any number of people. You're talking a lot of people to do this.
I suppose it sells millions of copies, or
well, it will sell over a period of the life of the book will be 20, 30, 40 years, and then periodically updating it as they go along. But it is labor intensive. Computers have really helped. They used to keep all these citations and index cards, by the way, in boxes. Now, of course, they can keep it in a computer database and pull things together. The Random House Dictionary was the first dictionary produced by computer. When they brought out the Random House Desk Dictionary. That was the first one.
Webster's, Random House, other names?
Let's see, there's Webster's, there's Random House, American Heritage. Those are probably the 3 best dictionaries. Then there's the Webster's 7.
That's all the names.
Collegiate
dictionaries.
Dictionary.
Pardon me getting over a cold.
What's that
here.
mean?
Just
7th edition?
Name. 7th edition. Now they're up to the 9th edition or something. It's Webster's, whatever number they use.
What about overseas? Oxford, do they have a dictionary?
Well, there's the Oxford English Dictionary, which is the ultimate dictionary in the world. That's just a joy and a delight to read. It traces the entire history of a word, from its first occurrence in English all the way through, giving you the dates, the source, and the citation. You can look up a word and find its entire history. If you go to the OED, as it's called, you can look up the word nun and nunnery, and you will understand why when Hamlet turns to Ophelia and says, "Get thee to a nunnery," she runs off the stage in tears. If you go to the OED and look up the meaning for nunnery at the time of Hamlet, when the play was written, you'll find out that it meant brothel.
That is fascinating.
Doublespeak is your book, and
that's crazy.
You say it's in its 4th printing. Do you want this to change anything, this specific book, and have you seen any evidence that, besides the journalists and the call-in shows and all that kind of stuff, that somebody's taking this book and using it to change things?
Hey, boy, what a great question to ask. I just got a newspaper clipping, in which there's a letter to the editor quoting my book to support the argument that the person is making about deceptive language. So as my mother said when she sent me this clipping, she ran across it and she said, "Somebody bought your book and read it, it seems." I would hope that I will change things by I produce what I like to think of as a handbook for survival in the 20th century, in the age of the media.
So I don't know, this is pretty long into this video. I don't know if you guys have the aptitude or I should say appetite to consume this kind of content this far in, but he just said it 27 minutes into his video, and who knows how long into my commentary video. He said why I'm doing this right here, right, guys? Consuming this kind of information is survival. Okay, it's vital. If you want to be one of the ones that survives this particular twist and turn that America's going through, you're going to want to be someone who has consumed this kind of information, who can understand the use of words, the use of rhetoric, and certainly the use of doublespeak, and how it has affected you and how it is affecting you today and it will affect you tomorrow.
So that people will become critical consumers of language. We talk about the consumer movement, where you have to be aware of the product that you buy when you go and purchase something. You have to be aware of the language that's used in our society. You are just as much a consumer of language as you are a consumer of goods. And so you have to be a critical consumer of language, just as you're a critical shopper. And if you run across language that's defective, take it back, just like you take back the defective toaster, and say, "I want an exchange on this one. Give me language that works."
I cannot say it any better, guys. Like that. This is like the antidote, right? I feel like what he's serving up here is the antidote to the flu that is the MAGA party, right? People are sick. Republicans are literally, they have this fever, and when you know those little new digital thermometers that people have now, when you kind of point it at your head, during the height of COVID, everyone had one of those before you can go into businesses. this is the antidote to that, right? So if you stick it on your head today, it says Trump or it says MAGA on most people's heads. What he's giving you is the chicken soup that is teaching you how to dismantle the germs that have infected your brain with this. Like all that crap that Fox has been spewing out into your heart and mind. He's teaching you how to pull those germs out of your soul and to win back your intellect and ultimately win back your soul.
Give me clear language.
Here's what Chapter 2 is all about. Therapeutic misadventures, the economically non-affluent and deep-chilled chickens, the doublespeak of everyday living. Excuse me. What is a therapeutic misadventure?
I will tell you the incident, and then you can figure it out. In 1982, during a cesarean operation, the anesthetist turned the wrong knob and killed the mother and child. The hospital called this a therapeutic misadventure. 3 weeks ago in Los Angeles, according to the Los Angeles Times, in a series of incidents that the pathologist called incredible stupidity and incompetence, the surgeons killed the patient. It included slitting the patient's throat during surgery. This was called a therapeutic misadventure.
How about economically non-affluent?
That's what the president of the City University of New York called the poor students attending the City University. They came from economically non-affluent families.
Deep-chilled chickens.
Frank Perdue filed a complaint with the Department of Agriculture that his competitors were selling frozen chickens as fresh. And the Department of Agriculture investigated and said, no, granted the chickens are packed in ice at a temperature of 28 degrees Fahrenheit. These are not frozen chickens. These are merely deep-chilled chickens and can therefore be sold as fresh. I suggested that we pack the same Department of Agriculture bureaucrats in ice. When they hit 28 degrees, we might ask them if they're deep-chilled or frozen.
You point out that there may be as many as 1 billion people in the world that speak English.
Yes, that's the estimate is 750 to 1 billion who speak English as a first or second language.
Why English?
It's become, it's simply from both the British Empire, and then we replaced the British as the dominant economic and political force in the world. And it's natural in history that that nation which has the greatest political and economic influence, that language is adopted by all people in the world. Rome had the same function, Latin functioned the same way. And so if you saw the story of English,
now dead, by the way,
that McNeil did, Robert McNeil did,
essentially.
he has the great episode where he goes to the shipyard in Singapore. And you have a shipbuilding yard in Singapore where the people ordering the ships are from Japan, they're Japanese. The workers are Singapore natives. The financing is coming from Hong Kong. And somebody else is from the United States has an interest in it. They all speak English. Everyone. It's the one language that they can all share, so they don't have to worry about other languages. So it's become what's called by linguists the lingua franca, the language of trade and commerce in the world.
Did you ever study another language?
Oh yes, my minors as an undergraduate were Latin and Greek, and then I also learned some German as a reading language for my doctorate.
Is English easy or difficult?
As a linguist, no language is any easier or more difficult than any other language, a linguist will tell you. As a practical matter, in pronunciation, after you reach a certain age of maturity, you will never be able to speak a language like a native speaker because your physical properties of producing speech will evolve in such a way that you can't produce certain sounds as accurately as a native speaker. It's simply a physical.
Now, I would counter that, if I may. I would say that that's only true of people who aren't actors. There's certain people who especially actors, who kind of have a knack for switching up their facial muscles and things. They have an ability to pick up that kind of stuff. So actors, I think, stand aside from what he's describing. It's just something that's just part of the actor's anatomy and their mental anatomy and their physical anatomy, the ability to copy and to put on another persona in an instant. It's just something that actors are very adept at.
Logical fact of life. But you can still learn that language. What you really learn when you learn a language, and this is why you should learn a foreign language, you learn a whole different way of looking at the world. It's tied in with doublespeak. Language is a way of perceiving reality. It's the only way we have of looking out there, seeing something, and turning to another person and saying, this is what I see. Now, we can both look out there, and you can say, I see a pre-dawn vertical insertion, and I can say, gee, I see an invasion. But it's through language that we talk about this reality, and we give some kind of means of expressing that reality. When you learn a foreign language, you will learn a slightly different way of looking at the world and interpreting that world. Chinese is fascinating because Chinese is so different from English. The Chinese don't have pronouns. They don't have gender in their pronouns. It is impossible in Chinese to say, well, my son, he is going. They just don't have that. They don't have is going, what we call the present progressive tense. It does not exist in Chinese.
Well, I will. Okay, that's very interesting because I do have a personal story in there. I don't know if you guys have been following me enough. My wife is Thai, and the Thai and Chinese they share a lot of everything from their original indigenous religion, which is Buddhism, which was shared from India and traveled throughout Asia. They also share blood. It is said that the Thais' blood actually seeded some of early China. So I did recognize that my wife would say things like open the light, close the light. These are words that she would use. And it was a little tiny bit of a language barrier with the way things are said and meant. So I understand that I have a personal connection with that, with Asian languages.
Verb tense becomes different. Number becomes different. English is, we have singular and plural, and we never even think of that. Plural is defined as two or more. In many languages, plural is three or more. There's single, dual, meaning just two, and then plural, which is three or more. It's a different way of seeing things and dealing with things, which is why it's always interesting to learn another language. Although I do think at times that doublespeak is in a different language, but probably doesn't qualify as a foreign language.
Now, the George Orwell Award for Distinguished Contribution to Honesty and Clarity in Public Language, Donald Bartlett and James Steele, reporters for the Philadelphia Inquirer in '88.
Yes. Oh, in '88 it was Edward Herman, professor of finance at the. That was '88.
That was '89.
They did a series of articles in the Philadelphia Inquirer on the tax reform bill, showing that through false, deceptive language that was inserted into the bill, billions of dollars in special tax breaks were given away to individuals and companies and corporations. And it was all done through deceptive language that no one knew, understood the language. It was written in such a way that it applied only to one individual. Great example.
Starting to remind me a lot of lawyer speak. If you guys have done any kind of business or been involved in lawsuits, the language is so cryptic. It's designed to kind of confuse a lay person is the term they would use, whereas a lawman or a person who is a lawyer would be able to just pick up that paper and in very short order understand all of the clauses and things that can get you in trouble, which is one of the reasons why we have to spend so much money in hiring a person that can speak lawyer speak, a lawyer. Fascinating.
Business was defined as a family farm in that bill, thereby giving them the special tax breaks for farmers. That business employs 25,000 people and has a gross income of over $1.5 billion a year. The tax bill called them a family farm.
Who gives the George Orwell Award, and what's usually the reason?
Well, the Committee on Public Doublespeak of the National Council of Teachers of English. We take nominations from anybody who wants to give us nominations. We vote. We have 35 members on the committee. They're all teachers of English. We have one statistician and one philosopher on the committee, and we vote. What we look for is someone who has contributed to clarity in language and public discourse. Nightline, I think, is a good example. Ted Koppel, I think, is famous for saying, wait a minute here, can we back up and explain that one for a minute? I mean, he's very good at doing that, and we think that contributes to clarity in discourse. We gave it to Bartlett and Steele because of revealing that intricacies of that tax law were needlessly done, and that the language was deliberately opaque to give special tax breaks to a lot of people and corporations. That's tens of billions of dollars worth. We think that that's important that people know about that this language is being used to take money out of their pockets because somebody's going to have to make up for that missing tax revenue. So we're
This is one of the major things with the MAGA Republicans, or just honestly Republicans in general. They've always had a knack, like a real talent, for finding ways to extract money from the poor while keeping more of their own. Wh- Uh, more of it for themselves. One of my favorite teachers was a man named Mr. Freshwater. He was very old back when I was in high school, and he was a social studies teacher. And he's the one that first explained to me the concept of the have and the have-nots. And he talked about how power and influence is siphoned away from people who don't pay attention. And if you aren't aware of doublespeak, you fall into that category. You fall into being pushed to the side and being what they call the poor, the have not.
looking for people who contribute to honesty in language, clarity in language that way.
Okay, the recipients of the Doublespeak Award. Same group give out.
Yes, the same group. We
Gives out
vote
this
each year, and from the nominations that we receive, and we try to give the award as a symbolic award to an American public figure who has used doublespeak that has consequences of some kind on public policy or a public issue. In 1989, we gave it to Exxon Corporation for calling the 35 miles of shoreline in Alaska environmentally clean. When reporters pointed out that there was still oil all over the place, an Exxon spokesman said, well, clean doesn't mean that every oil stain is off every rock. It means the natural inhabitants can live there.
Let me go quickly through the list through the 80s. 80 was Ronald Reagan. 81 was Alexander Haig. 82 was the Republican National Committee. 83, Ronald Reagan. 84, the Department of State. 85, the CIA. 86, NASA. 87, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North. And 88, Defense Secretary Frank Carlucci, Admiral William Crowe, and Rear Admiral William Fogarty. A political question to you. If someone read that list, they would think possibly that this is a one-sided award to only one side of the political spectrum.
Well, for this reason, the Republican Party has been in power for 8 years. And so,
Guys, I mean, come on. I can't say it any better than he did. That shows you the underground structure of what MAGA was, right? MAGA just didn't come out of nowhere. Make America Great Again just didn't sprout up out of nowhere. It had a structure, it had a scaffolding, as it were. And the list he just mentioned, every last one of those bodies, save for maybe NASA and the CIA, hopefully not the CIA, oh my gosh, have lent itself to breeding the cesspool of germs that would infect people's minds, infect politicians, and corrupt them, and start to create this sickness in America that ended up becoming what would breed the first vestiges of what Make America Great Again stands for.
and Jimmy Carter was in, he got it. So, these are the people who have the power to affect public policy through their language. As I point out, Democrats don't get quoted too much these days. They're not in power. If they get in power, they'll be right in there in the list with everybody else. I don't see it. I mean, we cited Dukakis during his campaign for his doublespeak, which he used. And if he had been elected president, he'd be in the running along with everyone else.
Either Republican or Democratic Party better than the other when it comes to doublespeak?
No, they both use it. It seems to go with the territory. Our point is that, as Orwell said, it's political language, and political language tends to, in the 20th century, to be this kind of misleading and deceptive language. Whether it's Johnson, by the way, the legacy from the Johnson administration was the language of Vietnam and the language of the poverty program, which stopped calling people poor and started calling them disadvantaged, and stopped talking about slums and ghettos, but the inner city. I mean, that's a heritage of double.
What do you think of, remember it was climate change, now it's what, weather extremes? Guys, it's 2024 and it's over 100 degrees outside. I'm in Maryland right now. We haven't had these many 100-degree days in forever. There has been records being broken almost every day this month. I believe Death Valley, someone died who was riding through Death Valley on a motorcycle. Death Valley hit its over 137-degree temperature, setting records. Like, it's climate change, but the powers that were at the time changed the language through doublespeak, and now it's no longer climate change, it's weather extremes. But it doesn't change the reality of who's going to pay for that, right? people are still dying, people are still suffering, people are paying higher energy bills because of the lack of addressing the underlying issue of climate change. Instead, they've put resources into changing your perception of it and just said, oh, we'll just kick that can down. Someone else will deal with this later on. Someone else will figure this stuff out. Someone else will fix it. But it still affects you. It still affects your children. It still costs you more to cool your homes now that it's 100 degrees in many parts of the United States, when just 5-10 years ago that wasn't the case.
Speak from the Johnson administration.
Let me go back to when we started this conversation. I asked you, I think in the beginning, is this done on purpose and with calculation? And you said yes.
Yes. In fact, I cite a couple incidents in the book where I can document it was done. One is revenue enhancement. They had a meeting in the Office of Management and Budget. They said, we need a phrase to replace tax increase. They came up with revenue enhancement. When Lawrence Kudlow, the economist, was asked why they did that, he said, because there's no better way to sell economic policy than the euphemistic route. He was quite proud of the fact that they came up with that phrase. And Peacekeeper, as the name for the MX missile, again, Robert McFarland chaired the committee meeting in which he facetiously suggested that they couldn't name it Widowmaker, could they? So instead they came up with Peacemaker. But later, President Reagan misread his cue cards and said Peacekeeper. And since it was a televised speech, it became the Peacekeeper. And it was a name that was deliberately designed to make a nuclear missile sound nice.
Does it work?
Yes. Oh, of course it works.
I mean, most people don't hear it.
They will hear some of it, but not all of it. One of my favorite examples from this past year is the Resource Development Park that they were going to establish in Kansas City, until the good folks in the neighborhood where they were going to put the park asked, what is a Resource Development Park? Do you know what a Resource Development Park is? In Kansas City, it's a dump.
Oh, my.
They were going to put a dump in their neighborhood until somebody asked what it meant. They deliberately invented that phrase to try and slip a dump into the neighborhood without anyone noticing it until it was too late.
You know, guys, this is starting to feel like a type of Trojan horse. Doublespeak seems to be a way to armor your word so that way it doesn't get past the immune system of the human mind. So that way you swallow this pill, and before you know it, you're infected with this virus and you don't know where it came from, but somehow it feels right now because you've swallowed so much of it. You've drunk so much of the Kool-Aid that was laced with sweetener that you don't realize it's been poisoning you from the inside out.
One last question, your favorite doublespeak word or phrase?
The Department of Defense, which until 1947 was the Department of War.
The book is called
Wow.
Doublespeak, and it's written by William Lutz, published by Harper & Row, in your
That's
bookstores.
crazy.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, guys, there you have it. If you stay with me this long, if you like videos like this, please share it with people who want to learn how to protect themselves, want to learn how to rid themselves of the influence of doublespeak. The only way to fix your fever, as it were, is to consume things like this book. I would say go out and get this book. Go out and get books that are written about this kind of thing. If you need something that is a little bit more your speed, because again, this is written in 1989, so I feel like the average attention span is just not going to it just can't afford, people can't afford the time to actually read these things. I probably will end up releasing a book that explains doublespeak to today's society that is a little bit faster and easier to read. When I do release that, it'll be down below in my coming videos. So if you want to stick with me, like, subscribe, share this video. Post your comments down below, guys. Do you understand the doublespeak? Were you aware of doublespeak before this video? Are you frightened because of this? How does this affect you? Do you use doublespeak in your job? Because I do have a sales background. When I was out of high school, I used to work at the now dead Circuit City. And one of the things that the manager taught me there was you don't have to lie to them. You just kind of have to massage them a little bit. He was talking about doublespeak. So guys, please nurture your spirit. Please protect yourselves. Be safe out there. I'll see you in the next video.